possess the highest moral principles are not immune from often spectacular departures from the standards they expect others to follow, including former New York Governor Eliot Spitzer and political commentator Rush Limbaugh. The number of fundamentalist preachers and other religious leaders who also have had dramatic falls from grace are further evidence that even those who profess the strictest moral tenets can fail in their struggles with their own darker sides. Swiss psychoanalyst Adolf Guggenbühl Craig suggests that some of the people most at risk for major transgressions of appropriate conduct are those who fight against their own darker impulses by adopting and proclaiming the strictest of moral principles. Unable to deal with their own emotions and moral ambiguity, they think in black and white and identify themselves with rigid moral codes and righteous causes, thus justifying their own behavior. Nevertheless, just as we recognize that some missteps are part of being human, we also know that there are people in this world who regularly and systematically do truly bad things, who seem to operate without the moral constraints experienced by the rest of us. These people seem different from everyone else, and in some very fundamental ways they are. By virtue of the frequency and degree of their deviance from socially acceptable behavior, they are regarded as exhibiting psychopathy, a psychological condition that represents particular ways of behaving and viewing the world. They are psychopaths. Psychopathy involves a major abnormality in how people interact with the world around them, characterized by a lack of empathy for other people's feelings, as well as behaviors that are considered inappropriately deceitful, aggressive, and indifferent to the rights or feelings of others. The psychopath ignores social, legal, and moral standards of conduct in order to meet his or her own needs at the time, often ignoring potential long-term consequences in deference to immediate gains. The rest of us may violate those standards of behavior when our inherent sense of right is overpowered by factors that may include a sense of obligation to a group or cause or the ability to rationalize that it is okay just this once, allowing us to do something that we would ordinarily disapprove of for ourselves or others. True psychopaths don't need to rationalize, although they will if their behavior is questioned. Antisocial behavior is their norm, not the exception. Of course, there are others who do not meet the full criteria for psychopathy and yet engage in heinous acts that most of us would turn away from in disgust and horror. If this were not the case, world history would not be full of tales of apparently normal people and societies committing acts of genocide, such as the Holocaust and the mass killings in Rwanda. But even routine patterns of deception or attempting to take advantage of others do not necessarily mean that a person is a psychopath. Context and culture play important roles and are important factors to consider in assessing the nature of behavior. Take lying and conning others as an example. Generally speaking, in the United States, a person who relies on inflated representations and continually makes promises that he or she doesn't anticipate fulfilling is likely to be considered a psychopath, at least in casual terms, unless the person is a politician stumping for votes. Similarly, in a Middle Eastern bazaar where exaggeration and haggling are an expected part of the experience, efforts to convince a tourist to visit a shop owned by my cousin and buy the finest carpets in the region at an inflated price are the first steps in a well-established, time-honored way of doing business. The hapless tourist who buys the rug at face value is the one with the problem, and may even be insulting the merchant by refusing to bargain. On a more serious note, prisoners of war who intentionally and repeatedly deceive their captors to save their lives or the lives of others will be considered heroes, not psychopaths. The difference between these people and a true psychopath is that the psychopath will have exhibited a pattern of manipulating, conning, and perhaps violence in multiple settings, not just on the campaign trail or in the rug market, in a manner that is considered antisocial in his or her culture. No thought, no weighing of moral pros and cons is involved. Psychopaths are on automatic pilot, and their moral compass is either absent or, if present, always pointing in the direction of their self-interest. In other words, perhaps the main difference between psychopaths and the rest of us is that they are not concerned about the difference.